My quiz, because we're able to be in two places at one time. But I am so pleased to be able to to introduce our Vulcan Teacher of the Year, Dr. Muhsinah, who is the Academic Program Director in our Chemistry Department. And yes, Dr. Vereen is giving you much love and applause for your outstanding contributions to the college. We are so excited to learn more about the work that you are doing as part of both your scholarship and your service to the larger community. So I welcome you, and we will privilege you with the total control of the screen and look forward to engaging in this necessary and important dialogue. Thank you, Dr. Morris, for joining us this summer.
Thank you so much for having me. I am grateful to be here. This kicks or ends my birthday week. My birthday was Wednesday, so I'm still feeling those birthday vibes and excited about that. So glad to be able to share. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen with you all. And let me move you all to the side so I can see my own slides. So there's a little background story about why I got interested in metacognition, even before I knew it was metacognition and what that meant. So I had a 10th grade chemistry teacher when I was a student, and I fell in love with chemistry, obviously. I'm in chemistry, but more than that, he made a point of teaching us how we learn best. And he wanted us to be proficient in not just chemistry, but all of our subjects. And he spent time in class talking with us about developing study habits in a way in which is more authentically who we are. And so fast forward through my life and schooling, everything that he taught me to start being more aware of myself and how I learn, what settings I learn best in, have been put into practice and helped me achieve the goals that I wanted to achieve in life, especially professionally. One of the things I also took note of is when I was a graduate student at Emory working on my PhD, I also decided to go to business school. So I went to business school for project management and was working on an MBA, and I was taking a class called organizational leadership. And in this class, they personality tested us. We had to take the Myers-Briggs personality type test. And then we had to write about what type of leader we would be based on what it said and what type of employee we were, what type of boss and leader we would be. And for me, it was kind of eye-opening. And I asked my sister, who was a business major, I said, have you all always been taking these types of tests? And she said, oh yeah, in business, that's what we do. I mean, she was human resources. She was like, that's how we decide if people are right for the job, and we give them these tests, and it kind of lets us know where they fit in teams and that kind of thing. And I was like, how come we don't do that in STEM? Because a lot of times students kind of fall by the wayside, but a lot of it has to do with them just not really truly knowing themselves. And so when I started teaching, part of what I wanted to do was make sure that my students had full awareness of who they were, and that they knew that I took an active interest in not just them, but how they learned best, and that I honored that in my classroom. So today's talk will be about metacognition in STEM, nurturing self-awareness to increase student achievement. And I'm really going to stay along the lines of just what I have done so far with my classes and how I'm going to then use that to correlate some data as to how it increases student achievement. But what I know so far is more about my students from doing this. So I'm going to talk about the importance of building a rapport with students, understanding the STEM student as an individual, their individuality, creativity, STEM and the student, things that I did help define STEM identity, introspection and what allows students in STEM to persist through the major, finding inspiration within the field with your students, and then self-development plans, reflections, and honest assessments. So the importance of building a rapport. Rapport really is a relationship that is characterized by agreement or mutual understanding or empathy that makes communication possible or easy. Each student that comes into our classrooms, that comes into our space, is first a human being with hopes, dreams, and fears. And all of these things follow them into the classroom on day one. One of the questions I asked myself, and I'm asking you, is have you taken the time to understand what are your students' triggers? What keeps them from being effective in your class? Do you know what will cause them to stumble? At what point do they freeze? You know, students come with this idea that they have to have a certain level of intellectual competence, which they do in some right, but also they can overcome some of the things that hinder them from being their best student, simply if someone took the time to guide them a little bit more individually. And so one of my teaching philosophies, or part of my teaching philosophy, let's see, it stuck, is that I aim to build a rapport with my students before asking them to perform for me. So before giving them any type of assessment, I have them do a self-assessment and a self-inventory. So you know how we give these get to know your student kind of things in the beginning, you know, just give your information so that I'll have all the student information at the beginning of the class term. But for me, I give them this personality profile as a part of building a rapport with them, and then sharing parts of myself as well and what I have used to help me overcome and to achieve in my own field. So one of the things that's not well done in STEM is how to really understand the STEM student as an individual, and how to help them overcome what we now know as the imposter syndrome. But the worst enemy to STEM students is self-doubt. And a lot of that is due to lack of self-awareness. And Sylvia Plath has this quote that I kind of put a twist on, that if only our students knew who they were and what they are capable of, they would be more motivated to go the distance. And I truly believe that if we could tap into that self-doubt and create self-confidence in them and help them build a better STEM identity of who they are in STEM, then they will persist in these majors that are a little bit more challenging and difficult for them. So then how does metacognition really fit into this scope? Metacognition basically refers to the learner being aware of what he knows as he goes about the learning process. Its components are awareness of one's own cognition, in particular cognitive processes, strategic or reflective knowledge of how to go about solving problems and handling cognitive tasks, and contextual and conditional knowledge and knowledge of self. In an obvious way, metacognition is connected to being self-aware and applying that self-awareness to one's learning process. So a part of what I am intending on doing, and I've been trying to work with my students on doing, is getting them to become more self-aware, having them think about what they're thinking about how they learn, thinking about who they really are and how to show up authentically as themselves, but to also identify their strengths and weaknesses, and then to improve on those weaknesses so that they can be a better student. So when we talk about individuality, students' creativity, ability to innovate in STEM, research suggests that our personality traits are enduring and they remain largely constant across a person's lifetime. So learning about the personality profile may lead students to identify and develop their strategic strengths and work on their weaknesses as they correlate to personality traits identified in their fields of choice. Faculty in STEM fields might be able to utilize students' profiles to appropriately consult with the student on a choice of a major and to help promote coping strategies that lead to ultimate academic success in their field of study. And so I use the personality profile to do just that, to help students come up with a plan of success so that they will not be self-defeated. So like that we can get over that defeatist attitude that a lot of them have simply because they know that chemistry is challenging. So I use this free personality typing instrument, and it's based on the Myers-Briggs personality types. So it is called personalitymax.com. You can get the Myers-Briggs type test for a fee if you would like, but this does the trick for us. But it tells you a number of things about the student. And so they'll learn about their personality type and their temperament, which is related to the personality types. It also does the inventory of their multiple intelligences, learning styles, and we'll talk about learning styles and right or left-brained type of learners. But more than that, we'll talk about some of the neural myths behind learning styles and how that is used in the classroom and why I still use it as a part of this profile, even though I know that it's something that is theorists have kind of debunked as far as it being a way that you learn. So this is kind of the report that you get. They get about 20 something pages about things that in their personality. So this is just kind of what they first see when they get their personality report back. And so they'll see their personality type, what that is described as. So I am an INFP, which is a dreamer. My temperament is that of a visionary. And then it tells you what the first two things mean. So I'm introverted and intuitive. And then regarding my multiple intelligences is linguistic and musical. It says that I'm more of a visual learner and that I'm right-brained. And so this is kind of what the students first see when they pull up their profile after they do like this inventory. This survey has 211 questions on it. It also tells them how much of their personality type is introversion versus extroversion, intuition versus sensing, or feeling versus thinking, or perceiving versus judging. So I am extremely introverted, which people would find to be quite alarming. But I also find that a lot of my students are also introverts too. So it takes a little bit more for to pull me out of my shell. I have to be in my lane, I guess, to really feel it. And a part of what the work I do is in my lane. So I guess I seem extroverted, but really I'm an introvert. I base my moods and everything off of intuition versus sensing what I see in the world. I'm more feeling versus thinking. And that's what makes me this visionary. And then regarding perception and judging, I'm just about even there, but perceiving is one of my stronger sides. And then looking at temperament, they get this chart of temperament and that there are 4 temperaments in the population and like where does yours fit? So I'm a visionary as a part of my temperament. And so I'm an intuitive feeling temperament. And then they also get these charts. Now they also give them words and explanations and things like that that talk about these in more detail, but I'm just kind of giving you an idea of the general survey of information that the students will receive. They also get their intelligences and they're scored. So I'm highly linguistic and musical. And yes, I did play a musical instrument. I played in the symphony. So I played string bass, and then I played in a jazz band and played electric bass, and started off playing piano as a young girl. So pretty musical. And then logical and interpersonal all the way down. So it uses the 8 multiple intelligences here. And then they'll give you how much of a visual versus kinesthetic versus auditory learner you are. I'm about even when it comes to that. And whether you're right or left brained, and I'm pretty even though it's primarily right brained. So I am a dreamer, and I am a visionary, which makes all of the work that I have been doing par for the course in regards to my personality type. It also will show them in the population all of the personality types. So they'll get to see what all of the personality types are. And then based on the population, how many people in the population are considered to be what you are. So for me, INFP, only 2% of the population are these dreamers or visionaries. So it also will give them typical strengths and possible weaknesses. And this is the part where I will get them to start to reflect on these things. So I'll ask them questions about what their strengths and what their weaknesses are. Do they feel like they ring true with them? Which ones are or are not what they would identify with? And then how does it, how can they improve on their weaknesses? And then how can they use their strengths to become better STEM students? So I asked them plenty of questions in reflective discussions to help them to not just understand their strengths and how they can be used, but also then if you have weaknesses, which we all do because we're human, right? Then how can you overcome them? So I did this in my general chemistry course. I do it in every course actually, but this was a larger pool of students. And what I get from this, so after students do this test, this data doesn't propagate. So I send them a link to a Google form and they put in what they are. So they fill in what their personality type was, what was their temperament, what was their multiple intelligence, the top two, what were their learning styles, and did it say they were left or right brain? So this is the information that comes from me sending this out to students. So out of all of my students, and it was 45 of them in this particular class, the majority of them were INTJs, which are strategists, which is actually very good for someone who wants to be in STEM. They make very good researchers, and they are analytical. They have analytical minds. They're thinkers. They're an intellectual temperament. What I did find to be interesting is that 14 out of the 16 personality types are mentioned in this cohort of students, but there were no INTPs, which are the engineering types, and there were no ESFPs, which are persuader types in this particular cohort of students, but primarily strategists, which are intellectual type, were in this one. Okay. And so then this is a breakdown of the temperament types that were in that same class. So you would expect, so every temperament there are 4 temperaments. And so 4 different personality types match the 4 temperaments. So you have the SJ temperament, which is the protector. So ESTJs, which are the overseers, and the ISTJs, which are the examiner personality types. The supporters and the defenders are all protectors. The intellectuals, which was the majority of this particular class, are made up of our chiefs, our strategists, and then our originators and our engineers, and which was kind of interesting because I had no engineers in this particular cohort. So the rest of them were originators, chiefs, or strategists. And as you saw before, a majority of their personality types were the strategists. I'm a visionary. About 25% of that particular class was a visionary as well. And the visionary types are mentors, confidants, advocates, and dreamers. And then the least amount of students that were represented in that cohort were creators or creator types. And our creator types are our entertainers, our craftsmen, people who like to work with their hands, our artists, and the persuaders. And then there were no persuaders at all in this particular cohort. So I also have a graph of their multiple intelligences and just which one was their strongest. And in this cohort of students, logical, mathematical intelligence was highly represented. So it's kind of in line with the students who would take general chemistry, our dual degree engineering students, our computer science students, not just our chemistry majors, but also our biology majors, our psychology majors. So in a lot of ways, I could see this. And then we had a lot of musical and kinesthetic multiple intelligence that were also represented. What's very interesting is in my class, we do a lot of group work, lots of group work. I believe in active learning, I believe in small group learning, and I believe in us putting our heads together and being a team and being inclusive and brainstorming and learning from one another. What was really, really interesting about this cohort is they're not 4.5% of them had a strength in interpersonal skills. So group work and working in groups and teams was not necessarily something that just came natural to them. And I like that actually, because that means that they're learning a skill when they're in my class. They're learning a skill that is going to be essential for them in the workplace and when they leave. But what was interesting was that there were no verbal or linguistic or visual spatial multiple intelligence represented by this cohort, which is quite interesting because you need a certain level of visual or spatial kind of understanding to be able to kind of understand the rotation of molecules, to understand how they are configured in space, just to kind of understand some of the nuances of reactivity that multiple intelligence as a strength was not represented at all. And then you also get information about learning styles, and then whether the students are left or right brain, which was pretty even in this course. I always see very few people whose preference of learning, and I can't necessarily say learning style because we know that learning styles has been debunked as a myth and something that really cannot guide instruction. But if you look at the students, most students are visual and or kinesthetic in a way which kind of fits the mode of how they prefer to learn, perhaps. So even though learning styles and left-right brains is tested by this survey instrument, whether either of these types of results has any bearing on student achievement is not really substantiated by scientific evidence. Students have access to this information from the survey tool, but are also educated on the limitations of this information. So our main focus in getting them to see all of themselves and what a survey tool would tell them about themselves is for their own self-examination, self-reflection, healthier study habits, and for them to be able to develop discipline in their subjects and fields. So how can you, or how do you use this information with your students? So in class and in office hours, I find it very useful. So I take time, and they do put this information also, not just in a Google form, but on a discussion board on Blackboard, because especially since we've been virtual, I've used it a lot more for them to discuss their practices and to use the journal to have them do self-reflections before and after exams and how they studied and what's their study plan. But when I'm in person too, after having read everything and getting that data back, I kind of use the collective results to help guide my class instruction, to show them like what their cohort of students in the class looks like, and to talk about all of their differences. But for me, I really do believe in a differentiation of instruction for a lesson. We target many different ways for them to be able to solve problems so that they learn how to tackle problems in chemistry from a real world perspective and not just their own ideas. That's why I have them work in groups so that they can kind of see where other people's minds are with the subject. And often as instructors, we're limited by our own lack of self-awareness. And so a lot of times being sage on the stage is not necessarily the best way to disseminate information. And so it makes me also look at who I am, because like I said, I'm a visionary. I'll try everything. I'm the big picture person. I want to see them, be their best selves, which can also be good, but it can also push away some of those students that are more logical and think that it's unrealistic to expect a certain thing from them because they feel like they have certain weaknesses. So we're both like changing and growing and learning from one another by looking at each other's personality profiles. It also helped me with determining what best practices I need to implement in my classroom and to make sure that I am doing a wide array of best practices that will help the student build their weaknesses too. And then in office hours with students, especially students who I advise and want to talk a lot about their career plans, I use them as a starting point to really discuss where they feel stuck and for them to do an honest assessment of their time management skills, their study habits, and what they need to do to get better. So it's been very helpful in helping me to advise students on how to strengthen their self-realized weaknesses and help them to stay on track in their major. More than anything else, it makes students more aware of their own flaws and it makes them take ownership of it. And when they take ownership of it, then they're more able or more apt to make changes that will make them into better students. And then that allows them to be able to persist in the major. So things that actually define STEM identity would include like the attitudes that people have towards STEM, their STEM self-efficacy, just how well they are able to master particular topics in STEM, mastery goal orientation, like how well they work towards particular goals, their agentic behavior towards one's own graduation goals. And so if these are things that help to define what your STEM identity is, then I feel like it's necessary that we focus on some of these things in conjunction with our personality profiles and typing to help students to be able to develop better attitudes towards who they are in STEM and see themselves in STEM. So learning about STEM identity actually requires that students have an honest self-examination of their own approach to mastering the subject. So that's why this is so important for me and why I pry so hard with them to make them explore their personality, their passions, and especially their habits. Personality profiling delves into who a student is based on their own self-reflection of themselves. It's opening a window to their entire selves from their perspective. It allows them to take ownership of their actions, which also includes their own time management, study skills, and study habits that have or that need to be cultivated. So left to their own devices, students will continue along the trajectory that they feel like works best for them. But if they really take a clear assessment, an honest assessment of who they are, then they're better able to adjust some things. So especially when I talk to students about time management and the things that they do in a 24-hour cycle, that's when they learn, okay, I could do better. They take a little bit, I do have a habit of doing this, or my personality profile revealed that this is a particular weakness for me, that I might start something, but I don't have much follow through. And when I thought about it, it really made sense. Now that I know that there's something that is a weakness that is also a part of my personality type, then I can make some changes. And so I've seen some students make changes because of it. So out of the things that define STEM identity, how exactly does a person become self-aware and acquire self-information to form a self-concept? So self-awareness, based on Duval and Wicklin, their cognitive psychologists, refers to the capacity to become the object of one's own attention, in which the person actively identifies, processes, and stores information about the self. So psychologists still argue that self-awareness is important because it enables self-regulation. It helps you to develop your own unique abilities. And so cognitive psychologists have talked about there being three sources of self-awareness and how that's built through the social world, through physical stimuli, and also through how you perceive yourself. And so what we really try to work on is how students perceive themselves, and then how their self-awareness really is going to play a larger role in them not necessarily always seeing themselves socially and how it looks, to other people, or where they think they should fit in society, or based on social media and other books and programs and what's in their physical world, but how can you actually develop your own inner self in order to be a better STEM student? So what allows our students in STEM to persist through the major? And there were so many different things that came up, so I just threw some of these words on here, but a lot of things that came up in the literature was personal development by mentors in their programs, training, acceptance, inclusiveness, feeling like they have a sense of community, mentorship, purpose, exposure, experiential learning experiences, clear career trajectory support, having access to research opportunities, systematic coaching, so not just giving them information, but giving them strategies and best practices that work best. And then, like I said, building a sense of real, true community. So all of these things allow students to persist through the major. That's why starting off in like a general chemistry class or in the beginning of any one of my chemistry class, it's important for me to delve into who the student is and who they think they are and who they think they are supposed to be along this STEM journey. So how can you really find inspiration within the field of STEM for students, especially our students at Morehouse? So a part of what we do is to help identify images of STEM professionals who look like our students, who've had the same life experiences that our students have had. And that has gone a long way to helping students see themselves as scientists. In all of my courses, I try to infuse a little bit of Black life history and culture. So who were some of the chemists that, have made an impact in our culture? How can I eliminate imposter syndrome? So I already go ahead and bring it up to them because a lot of them are suffering from it, but I just go ahead and talk to them about it and help them eliminate some of the mindsets that they may have that keep them stuck there. I try to help them visualize their own successes, but we do that through actual setting of SMART goals, like real measurable and attainable goals. Like how can you create then a plan for success in that way? And so part of that is developing, having self-development plans, reflections and honest assessments. So the first thing that we always do is our self-examination. And then a lot of what I do too is self-reflection. So like I said, they go on Blackboard and they discuss each other's personality types and they have to respond to someone else's and they have to talk about their compatibilities, but they have to talk about their study habits and time management skills as a way of reflecting on their own practices and how well they thought they did on a particular exam or quiz or assignment based on what they know about themselves, how they actually approached learning the information. And then the third step is, okay, so now how do we redirect you? How do we come up with some kind of plan that'll help you better yourself? So give you some direction as to do better in the future. So very important is to take an inventory of their strengths and their weaknesses and reflect on the current practices that they may have, but help them to visualize their future self, and then to help them develop a personalized plan and map it out. I know it might seem like a huge thing to help every student come up with an individualized plan, but that's a part of their own journey, is having them journal and reflect and continue to self-reflect after every assignment or exercise on their own. And Blackboard allows you to do it very well because they have the journal feature. And so you can kind of have a running log of your progression through the course. And then let's not forget that this is also a circular process. So it's not just as linear as this, because even if you develop a personalized plan and you map out particular things, it might be time for you to go back and take another inventory of your strengths and weaknesses, and then do another reflection. So it's a continuous process of growing and changing that happens within our students. And some of the students, questions that I ask my students are, in any one of these categories, why are you doing this? Like, what is your STEM story? Have them develop what their STEM story is. What makes them deeply loyal to the STEM field? Not just intellectually, like that they, oh, I'm smart, or, you know, this is something that, you know, other people thought I would do. Like, what is their purpose for being here? And then what really sets them apart? What are their strengths? What makes them unique? How can they contribute to the field? And then what really would they like to achieve? How can they clarify their goals? And then what impact they would like to make? I make them visualize themselves in the future, 5, 10, 15 years down the line, writing a letter to themselves in the future about uncertainties that they may have currently and what they're experiencing on their journey. It's quite interesting because I've been doing this a long time, and I was at Spelman from 2012 to 2015. And I have a student who just is about to finish up her PhD at University of Michigan in chemistry. And I pulled back a letter that she wrote to herself about where she wanted to be 5 years from now. And she was just, she just couldn't believe it. She was like, wow, I am exactly where I wanted to be. But had I not done that exercise, I wouldn't have persisted in really dreaming and thinking about it. You know, I had like this understanding, but it wasn't concrete because it wasn't on paper. It wasn't something that I really talked much about. But now that I am further along in this journey, I see that I can attain these goals. Everything that I wanted to achieve, I'm on the right path to doing so. And so I feel like it's really, I've seen the impact of it in students that have gone on to graduate and professional schools. And I find it refreshing to know that just this much made an impact on them in their journey. So it's not just about the personality typing that helps students achieve. There are research-based strategies that also help aid in student achievement. And I share these practices with students along the way in helping them become more effective learners. So spaced practicing, developing a study plan, consistent work, making sure that you're not cramming before an exam, that you are chunking information, switching and interleaving. That means that you're switching between ideas to make linkages and to not just study one thing in isolation. Elaboration. So we do a lot of ask, explain, and connect, like how and why questions, having them elaborate a little more. So there's something called the 5 whys, and I think maybe you all have heard about it, but you talk to students about a particular subject, but you continue to ask them why until they kind of get to this real focus as to why a particular thing happens. And it helps them understand concepts in greater detail. I also talk to them about retrieval practice. Just sit down with a blank piece of paper and recall everything that you think you know. everything that you think you know. If you were writing this lecture or you were writing this lesson, write down everything that you know. And that has helped students be able to do better in class and to build better study habits. And then they cross-check their notes to then go back and then correct what they already retrieved. And then dual coding, which helps students combine their words with visuals. So we do have students that are are creators, are artistic, and the combination of putting their words with the visuals helps them be able to understand concepts better. I also have them practice explaining figures and graphs. It's interesting how people in STEM will just ignore a figure or a chart, but they contain data that matters, that once you can understand it, will help you also understand concepts. I think one of the biggest things about me becoming a chemist was the ability to be able to think through and problem solve, because I am a solutions-based person. I like to find the solution. So there are many problems in life, but if I could find the solution and I can think through it, then I felt like I could be successful, hence me going into chemistry. I also talk to them and teach them about developing concrete examples. So there are a lot of abstract concepts that they have to then try to turn into a concrete idea, and helping them find real world examples of seeing this science in action is also been helpful. So it's not just about personality profiling them as a way of helping them see themselves, but also then giving them strategies that help them achieve too. And people will gravitate to what works best for them based on their own personality types, but knowing who you are and knowing what your limitations are is one of the best ways that you can fight the need to say that this is too hard or I don't want to continue to do this, especially if it's something that you feel like your purpose to do. And so I would like to thank you for showing up here today for my talk. And so I thank Morehouse, the Division of Life Sciences, the Chemistry Academic Program, faculty, staff, and students, the Faculty Development Teaching and Advising Center, the Faculty Development Committee, fellow Carnegie Fellows, and my colleagues that showed up, and any other additional guests for taking the time out on your Friday to spend time with me and hear about what I've been doing in my classroom. And if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to entertain them at this time. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent presentation, Dr. Morris. This is very informative. And I think the utility of this is that it is information that is central to the academic and student development aspects of our work. So I'm very excited about what you're doing. But I wanted to ask you to share a little more about how you reduce the students' anxiety around receiving feedback in their peer-based forum to help them improve upon their abilities to perform.
So the first statement, one of the first statements that I make on like the first day is that we're a family here. Like we're a family and we have to move as a family unit. Like we have to get over ourselves. Like we're gonna have to place our ego. So we do talk a little bit about ego and you know, how you can't really improve if you have a chip on your shoulder. Some criticism is valid, you know, and some is not. But as an adult, a person who has to work in teams, as a person who will go out into the real world where you will get a variety of different criticisms, you have to be able to take and discern what works for you and then what is not for you, and own that. So even if it is good for you, but you don't feel like it's good for you, own that you don't feel that way and know why you feel that way. So it's more about keeping them open to the idea that someone else may have something that you don't possess. And we all have different talents and gifts that we can all share. So you have to be open to hearing feedback from people. But in my class, you have to be open to making mistakes. Like I tell them, I'm not perfect. I'm gonna make a mistake. I'm gonna be right up here adding a number that needed to be multiplied. Okay, so like you will see me make mistakes, and you will see me say, I stand corrected. I am the first one to model that I can be corrected. So sometimes I actually will make a mistake that's blatant, so that a student can correct me, so that they can see me take correction from a student. Now, I'm supposed to be the subject matter expert, correct? But they need to also see that I'm human too. So yes, I make a mistake, sometimes deliberately, sometimes not, but more times than not, for them just to see me model what it looks like to take criticism. And sometimes students, they're not nice about it. They're like, hey, Dr. Morris, now, you know, that's wrong, you know? So sometimes, you know, it's not even like they're nice about it, right? But I have to be able to model what it looks like to take that kind of feedback and criticism.
Thank you. And that's it, Dr. Platin.
Yes.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Yeah, so so in general, I enjoyed this in the way that you made kind of metacognition more practical and gave really kind of concrete steps to how to implement in the classroom. So I really appreciate that. I'm trying to narrow down which questions I wanted to ask, because I've got a few. So let's see, which one do I think is... So I guess the one I'm most curious about is, how honest do you find the self-assessments to be? So where this is coming from me is, when I will talk with students one-on-one, they'll tell me, you know, that they're doing everything and they're working, and then I'll ask for some specifics. Well, basically, I never believe it. So as in, the thing that I come from, or rather, I believe that they believe it.
Yes.
Where, as in, they're like, I'm doing everything I can. Then they'll tell me what they're doing. I'm like, well, there are all sorts of other things you could be doing. Like, this is not what you need to do then, if it's not good. So I'm curious, how have you found that?
So, you know, I don't like to say, you know, people make up stories about themselves, right? We all do it, right? So a part of me sitting down, I like the office hours part of this, you know, like when I sit them down for office hours, because I have to tell them, like, you know, I already know. It's kind of like, if you, especially some students, like, you're telling me you're doing all you can. Let's unpack that. You know, let's really unpack that. Let me see. Let's talk about your calendar. That's the way I normally start, is their time management strategies. So like, let's really talk about what happens in a 24-hour day. Like, what are you really doing? And I'm like, listen, get honest with me. Act like I am your attorney. You know, you got privilege here. I need for you to really get clear about what you're doing on a Saturday or a Sunday even, where you think that what you're doing is effective and it's not. You're really not spending as much time, quality time, studying. So we talk about settings. Where do you study? How do you study? What does studying mean to you? You know, that's why I have those effective strategies as to how you can study. Because a lot of students feel like, because it's been working for me for so long, that this is just how I am or how I should study. I was getting A's in high school this way, or, you know, it worked when I was taking this course. But in chemistry, you have to really take your time with material. And it's that dogged repetition and practice and consistency that makes you a great student in chemistry. And so having them sit down and tell me that, oh, well, I studied for the quiz the day before, but like, we had like a week's worth of notes, but you didn't look at your notes. You don't look at your notes after class. You don't rewrite your notes. You don't take time to re-engage in the material. You definitely don't read the text. All of that, you know, are kind of things that come out in this really honest interview. And I mean, I just tell them, like, I already really know where you are And I mean, there are some students that may have some real learning or things that make it difficult for them to learn material or process material. But most of the time, that's not the case. Most of the time, students are so busy parading up and down, back and forth to Chick-fil-A. They ran into their friends. They spent a few extra minutes talking. That was supposed to be their study time. They decided they didn't want to walk to Woodruff. Oh, somebody had a party. All of those things kind of come out in this conversation. And so once I get real clear with them about them owning their actions, some of them turn the corner, and then some of them just like, look, this is just where I'm not mature enough to be in this class with you. I mean, but that's something that you also need to know. And I've had some students that's just like, look, I see where I am now, and I realize that I'm just not ready. I'm not ready to be a STEM student because I'm not willing to give up going to this party on Friday. I'm just not. Or I'm not willing to not, talk to my friends or set clear boundaries about what I can and can't do. So, yeah, but I make them own their actions, wherever it is. You're gonna own it in here. So, I don't really have students that kind of, well, they start making up stuff, but not really. Not after we really sit down and have a face-to-face and they see that I'm not going to entertain anything but honesty, because that's the only way I can help you. Like, I can't help a lie, but I can't help you if you're honest. But I can't do nothing with a lie. It's true, I can't. So helping them see themselves for who they are and calling it out. I mean, sometimes I just call it out too. And then after you call it out and it's true, it rings true to them, then they also start backpedaling like, okay, yeah, you got me. Yeah, I did. So I wasn't paying attention, or, I was on my phone when I was supposed to be paying attention in class, even though, a lot of things come out. And so they have to own their action, but you don't get very far with a lie with me. So I hope that helped or that answered some of your questions. Dr. Mendenhall, your hand is up.
Hello, Dr. Morris. Really, really enjoy your presentation.
Thank you.
I have I guess I'll start with the main question. So I appreciate the personality assessments. I think it's fantastic for students to be able to understand that on the STEM side. My question is, have you or has anyone in the literature looked at the effect of conducting these personality assessments on their actual grades? And moreover, has, for Black males in STEM, does it show that, is there any baselines that show that, students knowing this, how they learn or how their left brain, right brain, their intuitive, all these personality properties, is there any baseline data that shows like once they know this, it allows them to improve their grades?
So no, there is not a direct correlation that I've seen. So this is kind of why I took this on as something that I wanted to explore, because there is a gap in the literature as to how it relates to STEM students. They do have information about personality typing and how it helps in career fields and how it helps students be successful in particular careers. And so that's why it's used a lot in business school. But there isn't a lot of information as to how it really helps the STEM student. And so because there's such a gap in information there, and I have not really fleshed out totally what would be the best approach as to how to correlate these two things, I have been looking at models as to how they do it with career pathways only. And then first looking at the persistence, how does knowing or being self-aware help students persist in STEM and develop their STEM identity as a first layer. But then the next layer is then like trying to figure out how then can I correlate this to levels of achievement in STEM. You know, that's a little bit more, I would have to dig a little deeper, and I just haven't done that yet, honestly. But that would be the next step, is to really see that. It's been, the literature is vast when it comes to how it helps in careers and how business people and human resources have been doing the Myers-Briggs personality type testing for ages, but it really is a gap, because even when, as I was searching through it, so there's a lot of things about metacognition in STEM, but it doesn't correlate back to then using personality typing as a way to improve student achievement in STEM. So that's a question. And for me, that's the next step as to how can I then use this data to make a correlation, use what I know.
Yeah. The reason I brought that up, because we had looked at, well, probably me more so than we, but looked at for our peer-led team learning, how that affected students' grades in chemistry in particular. So say cohorts of students that did actually participate in POTL versus students that did not. And if the effect of POTL and that them having that recitation did actually help with their grades. So that's why I was asking, like, if there's any baseline data to show, like, if students don't, well, I'm sure we could pull that from anybody's class, but maybe not a course that you're teaching. But to look at students that did not do a personality assessment and look at the kids that did, and look at kind of essentially how their grades differ with that. But of course that will require, I guess, IRB and all that stuff. But just curious to know if you know, looking at that tangible data point, how them knowing this is the best way I learned, this is my quirks and things like that, how that would affect their overall productivity in general chemistry, for instance. But great presentation. I really enjoyed it.
I think that's a good start. I appreciate that, because one of the things though that I wonder is, would I have to, what's going to be the difference? So, like, you know, we have different people that teach general chemistry, and all of us bring something to the table that's quite different, right, to help students achieve. So is it, what would make the personality typing and being more self-aware and really that self-reflection stand out as a practice when we have such different teaching styles? The only way that I think that it would make a whole lot of sense, and I don't know if I'm off because I'm just kind of brainstorming, is if I were to teach 2 cohorts of general chemistry at the same time, and in one class implemented the self-reflective practices all the way through in the personality typing, and then not do it with the second class, but just teach the content, which I don't know, would that then make an equal comparison, you know, or a viable comparison? But then how can we really compare it if we have multiple teachers? Because I think we all bring out certain parts of helping students develop their STEM identity and helping them become more self-aware. We just do it differently. So then how could I really, we could probably talk about this, but I'm just brainstorming more about how could we really correlate that to student achievement? Because I think that there is a correlation somewhere, but I'm not really sure how to approach it. Most people approach it in a qualitative manner. So they do like the self-reflection, and how does that self-reflection then correlate to how well they did. But I haven't seen any quantitative like data or any real comparisons, especially in STEM, with this information.
As a follow-up to Dr. Mendenhall's question, how do you structure the learning activities where you're able to measure the different metacognitive outcomes in your instruction?
So I do active learning in my class. So we everything that the students do is it's kind of almost like having a flipped classroom as well too. So they have a number of things that they have to come into class prepared to be able to do and to be able to learn and to be able to participate in order for it to really be effective. So active learning has been, to me, the best way to get students involved in utilizing every part of themselves, strengths and weaknesses in a team setting. And I like it because they actually put what they learn into practice in front of me, where I'm able to witness it and then debunk some of the myths that they have. So it's like they're not just studying in a study group in isolation and believing what each other say, because they have me there to then kind of say, no, that I'm glad that you said that, that's not right. Now let me help you rework and troubleshoot your way back to the right answer. So helping them facilitate learning in that way based on their own understanding of the material. And then you had a second part about metacognitive outcomes. How did you say that?
I was, and that's because I being familiar with your work, that I know that you structure your learning activities so students are able to demonstrate the different levels of metacognition when you are evaluating their work. So I was just asking you to share some examples. For instance, if you want them to engage in creating, then you've already structured an activity that engages understanding and synthesizing for them to be able to create. So I was just asking you to share some examples regarding how you do that.
So especially in my analytical chemistry course, we have this entire 3D printing project that they do. And so students have to go through a gamut of different layers of learning to get to their final output, which is this creation of this prototype, right? This 3D printed prototype of specialized lab equipment. So students originally start off with just basic knowledge and just trying to get to know, and they have rubrics for understanding, like just the basic concept of how tolerances are derived in class, and then I'll assess that and assess their basic knowledge base. And then as it progresses throughout, them pitching their oral presentation skills and their ability to chunk down complex information, that also is then assessed and they get feedback on that. And then as they go through the process of troubleshooting and then as their learning becomes more complex and their planning and all that kind of stuff, then they're also assessed on that. And I have rubrics for everything that they do along the learning process, that then they get real-time feedback, and it allows me to give them feedback quicker based off a rubric of what I'm looking for them to be able to achieve along this pathway of a project. So is that kind of like what you're
Thank you. Are there any additional questions that anyone has, or follow-up questions? Dr.
Did
Moore?
have one more, yes. For the visions, where you have students kind of write down kind of their visions of themselves for the future and developing that identity, have you ever had, or what would you do for a student whose vision of themselves does not prioritize chemistry?
Oh, that happens all the time.
Okay. Okay.
That happens all the time simply because we have students who are not all chemists, right? So we might have a small cohort of chemistry majors in our classes, and then especially our general chemistry. The rest of them are a dual degree. They are, physics, they are computer science, they are just, biology, psychology, so kinesiology. We have students that come, but it's about them seeing themselves in their field. But then I've had students that are like, I don't even see myself fitting here. And we talk about that. And some students have changed their major because of what they have learned in my class about their own limitations and what they are good at, and it feels more authentic to them. So I've had students make the transition to sociology or make the transition to business because and want to be entrepreneurs and really study entrepreneurship, because the reason why they were going in science was because they felt like they wanted to tap into the innovative side of it and then create a business model off of it. But then they learned, hey, maybe I need to just study entrepreneurship in itself, like that it's okay. And they've had conversations with their parents and changed their minds, but their parents were doctors, lawyers, or engineers or something like that. And they felt the need to be in STEM simply because my parents were also in STEM. So I've seen that happen too. And for me, it's about the student understanding themselves best, and really doing what's best for them in their lives, and letting them know that someone is taking an active interest in who they are and not just what they can do and what they can accomplish, but really who you are. And part of that, to me, is that Morehouse mystique that nobody can quite quantify, is how do we really get students to not just develop disciplined minds, because that's a part of our motto, but for me, it's about how do you then develop the heart of the disciplined mind, the heart of man that wants to go out and do something greater than himself. And part of that is this work. That work is doing what I'm doing. So for me, it's okay that you don't want to be a chemist. It's okay that you don't want to stay in science. Where do you fit? What is your identity? Who are you authentically? And don't lie to yourself, because that's not going to get you anywhere. I really, truly feel like the reason why I am good at what I do, or at my best when I'm doing what I'm doing, is because I'm passionate about it. I like it. It drives me. It's something that it comes natural to me. But I want them to find that thing too. I am exactly who I wanted to be when I was a little girl, dreaming about who I wanted to be. I'm along the right path, and I feel like everybody deserves that gift, because otherwise, if you're living somebody else's dream for you, then are you really living? And so part of us being academics and being and having the pleasure of being in front of these young minds that are so moldable is to be able to get them to access their own capacity for why they are here. And part of that work is sometimes accepting that even your smartest students may not be a STEM student, right? They might decide that their strengths are best suited for another arena, and letting them know that that's okay, that it's okay not to be who someone else thought they were supposed to be, but own it. That's my thing. You have to be able to be courageous enough to own it, because you'll be better off on the other side of owning it than you would be denying it. So just helping them understand their own self-worth, really, and that they're going to be great at whatever they do, as long as they stay true and authentic, to it. And everything takes work. I tell them, everything you do going to take work. It's going to take you being disciplined. It's going to take you having a certain level of time management skills, you having a lot of interpersonal skills, being able to communicate effectively, being able to collaborate with people you like and don't like. All of that is going to be a par for the course. So if that's why you're backing out of STEM, then that's not a reason. But if truly down deep in your heart, you have another talent and gift that you feel is best suited for another field, then that's where you're supposed to be.
Ashe. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And thank you, Dr. Morris. As we continue to celebrate you as our Vulcan Teacher of the Year, we see how engaged you are and your passion for not just teaching, but also for development and service. So in this virtual capacity, we will continue to celebrate your birthday over the weekend. Happy Juneteenth.
Yeah.
everyone. And I wish you a safe and happy summer. We will keep you engaged in different capacities over the summer and make future announcements for our remaining Carnegie Fellows to complete and share their work. Thank you all for joining. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.